Warning, there will be some spoilers for the audio discussed in this video, so if you haven't already listened to it, please go and do so before you watch the rest of this video. Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So here's my review of the recently released Lost Stories Big Finish audio, Genesis of the Cybermen. So what did I make of it? Well, I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. Having read up on the original version of the story, I wasn't really expecting to like this audio version, at least not as much as I did, so it all came as a pleasant surprise. I loved how the main guest characters of Sylvan, Dager and Meta were each given their fair share of character depth. Take Dager for instance. He wasn't portrayed as just the stereotypical mad scientist type. There was a real sense of him trying to do anything to help his father and later subjects to survive. He became so fixated on it that it completely consumed him, and in doing so, he lost sight of what gave his people their humanity. I don't think this is something that would have been the case with the original version that Jerry Davis submitted. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't believe it would have been absolutely terrible by any means, but what David K. Barnes has done with the audio, where he's making characters like Dager at least a little sympathetic, probably just wouldn't really have been in the original, or at least not in the same way. Davis's original idea also seemed very out of step with what the show was like during the Peter Davison era, like how Revenge of the Cybermen felt with Tom Baker's era. The whole alien royalty thing seems like something that would be more at home during the 60s, particularly William Hartnell's tenure. And whilst the audio version still doesn't completely feel that much at home in the Davison era, David K. Barnes is able to make it work as a story anyway, without it seeming really stale and uninteresting. Hope I'm making some kind of sense here anyway. But I wouldn't say that the Genesis of the Cybermen audio is anywhere near as good as Spare Parts. Whilst Genesis gives an interesting angle to Cybermen's creation, I definitely prefer Spare Parts' darker and more grounded take on it. By grounded, I mean that Spare Parts doesn't have the alien royalty stuff going on. It just explores the Cybermen's beginnings through more ordinary people, which I find scarier and more effective, personally. This is not to say that Genesis of the Cybermen isn't dark or scary in places, it certainly can be at times. I think any story featuring the original Mondasian Cybermen ends up feeling pretty scary just by virtue of having them there, as I think they're the scariest and most effective Cybermen. But Spare Parts has a more domestic, kitchen soap perspective, especially early on. It makes the few human Mondasians we meet feel like they could be anyone, including people we know on our own streets, which then makes the dawn of the Cybermen a lot more chilling. Speaking of Spare Parts, I know that some of you might be wondering how Genesis of the Cybermen ties into it, and Earthshock as well. The answer is, well, the audio doesn't really try to connect with either of them, or even explain how Adric, Nissa and Tegan could meet the Cybermen in Genesis, and then not really know what they are in Earthshock. But I think this probably works in Genesis' favour ultimately. It doesn't spend any of its runtime getting bogged down in arbitrary canon explanations, it just focuses on telling its narrative, and letting you make your own headcanon up about it. I think most likely Genesis of the Cybermen is another Lost Stories audio that is essentially treating itself as a type of alternate history or what-if scenario. I've recently found out about how John Dorney intended for there to be an in-universe explanation for how these Lost Stories coexist with their classic series TV equivalents in Return of the Cybermen. This being that the Lost Stories versions are erased from time by the Fourth Doctor's interference in the Daleks' creation in Genesis of the Daleks, replacing them with the classic series versions. But that was cut from the Return of the Cybermen audio because the production crew thought it was a bit of a crazy, unnecessary, fan-fiction-y type of explanation that didn't really need to be in there, in their view. But I personally like to believe this explanation is canon anyway. It would make a lot of sense, and it makes me look at the Lost Stories in a whole new light. So it's how I'm going to explain how Genesis of the Cybermen could tie in with Spare Parts and Earthshock. Although if you choose to just have it exist alongside them anyway, then fair enough. Anyway, I like how David K. Barnes gives Nyssa a fair amount to do in this story. It's always difficult to make sure that every member of a 4-member TARDIS crew gets a fair share of the action in a story. This is something that the production team realised when this TARDIS crew was originally on screen, with at least one of the companions often not always getting much to do in most of the stories. The way Nyssa initially helps Dager, because she shares his scientist curiosity and wonder, only for her to later regret it and feel at least partly to blame for everything that happens, gives Sarah Sutton some good dramatic material to work with. Much better than what she would most often get on TV, to be honest with you. But anyway, I would have to give Genesis of the Cybermen a 7 out of 10. So it was pretty good and full of the kind of emotional storytelling you'd expect from a Cyberman origin story, but it's nowhere near as good as Spare Parts. And whilst I would have been curious to see what the original TV version of Genesis would have been like, I'm kind of glad that we didn't, and got a much better story in Earthshock instead. As, whilst I don't mean any disrespect to the hard work and efforts Jerry Davis put into the original storyline, it would have probably felt like something of a throwback. Whereas this audio version at least tries to add something more, even if it's still not feeling too much like your standard 5th Doctor story. So it probably works out for the best that we got this audio instead of the original version. But anyway, so there's my review of the Big Finish Lost Stories audio Genesis of the Cybermen. But what do you think? Do you agree with my thoughts on it or not? And how would you rate this audio? Please let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that subscribe button below, as well as press the bell icon at the side of it, so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. And I shall see you all in another video. So, until next time, bye bye!